Right. This true law stories. We are going to talk about the largest auto accident verdict in Virginia in 2022. We're going to talk drunk driving cases, the reality of the McDonald's hot coffee case, nuclear verdicts. The Johnny Depp trial disrupted Brian Glass's big case. Brian, say hi from BenGlassLaw.
Hey, brother.
And Brian, it's an amazing conversation because we're going to talk about these massive drunk driving cases, as well as some crazy drunk driving cases, and how they prepare for $1 million trial and how the little things add up in this. And we're going to even get into whole blood versus blood serum, which I knew nothing about, and the two most stressful times in a trial for an attorney. All this on True Law Stories. Of course, this is brought to you by videocasestory.com. One of the best ways to grow your practice or any other business is through your client stories. Go to videocasestory.com where we can help you collect and craft and deliver those stories. All right, let's get started. I'm excited. It's crazy cases, serious cases. I think personal injury cases to me are so fascinating because I think, we're going to talk about a few DUI cases and how they're different, but tell us a little bit about your firm, and then I want to talk a little bit about, just in general, how people misview personal injury law.
Yeah. So I run a 5-lawyer firm in Fairfax County, which is in Northern Virginia. It's just outside DC. I've been practicing here with my dad for about 5 years. First 10 years of my career, I really competed across town. I was in another injury firm, kind of making my own friends, my own way of doing things. And so my practice now is I represent people that have been hurt in auto accidents against insurance companies. And the thing that I really like about DUI cases is so often in an auto accident case, I'm really defending my own case, right? I'm defending there's maybe not much damage to the back of the car, or I'm defending that somebody has a prior history with the neck or the back, or that they're not a malingerer, right? But prosecuting is not the right word, but going after drunk driving cases on the injury side, we really get to start pointing the fingers. And so they're just, as auto accident cases go, they're just so much more fun on the plaintiff side than your run of the mill red car hit a blue car negligence case.
Yeah. And when people look at this and because I've dealt with personal injury cases in my own life with my family. And I think so few people there's just such a bad reputation for personal injury, and we talk about it all the time. But how do you think people perceive, these types of cases, and what's the reality behind it?
Well, people perceive you as an ambulance chaser until they need you, right?
Yeah.
And so one of the things that we commonly hear from people who call is the phrase, well, I'm not somebody who likes to sue, but this happened to me. And I'll tell you, Ian, invariably what comes after the but is some small inconvenience in their life, right? The kind of person who's going to say, I'm not really litigious, but a doctor was mean to me at the emergency room, right? And so, listen, have certain lawyers earned the reputation of being ambulance chasers and bottom feeders? Yes, for sure. But I think we also make for easy punching bags, right? And the reality is that if it weren't for lawyers, insurance companies would just be taking advantage of people, right?
Yeah.
So I think the only industry that's disliked more than the plaintiff's injury bar probably is the insurance company. And so that works out well for us. And the story that I'll tell you about today in this drunk driving case is we're doing real justice and protecting the public in a very real way that doesn't often get talked about, because when people think about personal injury lawyers, your mind immediately goes to the McDonald's hot coffee lady, which is a story that everybody knows, right? Quote, knows the story of the McDonald's hot coffee lady. Many people don't know all the details of it. And so when you end up talking to juries, it's like you want to identify the people that think they know things, and you're not going to educate them differently and give them all the details about it. But I want people who think that that's the persona of an injury case is I spilled coffee on myself and I got $1 million. I want you off my jury.
Yeah. And that's a whole, can we just do a quick recap of the reality behind that? Because I think so few people really know about that.
I'm going to butcher this reality, right?
Yeah.
But so let's just, with the grain of salt, that story, I think she was in New Mexico. She's an 80-year-old woman. She went through a McDonald's drive-through window and she spilled hot coffee on herself. And it was so hot that it melted her pants a little bit. She ended up getting 3rd-degree burns on her legs. And so what people don't understand about that case is a couple of things. Number one, McDonald's was brewing coffee way above industry standards. So if industry standard coffee is like 160 degrees, McDonald's was brewing it at 220. Why? Because it requires fewer beans and because there's greater profit in the cup of coffee when you brew it at a higher standard. They'd already had a number of complaints and they knew it was dangerous and they didn't do anything to fix it. The other thing, Ian, that people don't realize about that case is that New Mexico, or the state, whatever state it was in, is what's called a comparative negligence state. And so the jury decided two things. The jury decided what is the injury worth, and they assigned some dollar amount to that. Let's call it 10 million. And then they decided what percentage of, her name was Stella, what percentage of Stella's negligence contributed to the happening of that injury. And I think it was 20 or 40%. And then the result gets reduced by her 20 or 40% in a comparative negligence that you compare. Is it her fault? Is it their fault? What's the injury worth? And you discount it by the amount of the plaintiff's fault. Now, had that happened in Virginia, she would have recovered nothing because Virginia is a contributory negligence state where if you are 1% at fault for the happening of your injury, you don't get to recover anything. And so the hot coffee story becomes this, spill a cup of coffee, get $1 million, right? I think that's a Toby Keith line. But there's many things that people don't know or don't remember or never were told about in the first place about that case.
Yeah. No, and that's, I mean, really, because there's a huge lobby of insurance companies going out there and putting out the media that personal injury attorneys are bad. And I mean, over and over and over again, we've heard these cases of insurance companies just being horrible. And I keep saying it, like, I mean, man, Brian, we're friends, but if you sent me, we'd be really good friends if you sent me $2,000 a month and didn't expect me to do anything.
Well, and I'll tell you, the one last thing about, because you mentioned the insurance lobby, right? The last thing that people don't know about that case is that she would have settled, it's documented, for like $140,000 or something like that.
Wow.
She really just wanted her medical bills covered, and they wouldn't make her an offer. And so this is what happens, Ian, with insurance companies called these nuclear verdicts, these enormous verdicts. But the reality is behind every nuclear verdict is a case that could have been settled for much less money.
Yes. No, we talked about that. We had a case on in New York with Steve Williamson where, she just wanted her hospital medical bills covered and the school would not cover them. And it's like she slipped and fell and was massive injuries and they just wouldn't cover. And then, like you said, nuclear verdicts, the jury gets after them. And so let's talk a little bit about drunk driving cases and why they're different than, if someone's drunk and driving in a personal injury case versus someone who's just driving.
Yeah. So, and this is a little bit nuanced, and I'll give you the Virginia version, and it's going to be a little different in every single state. But Virginia's got something called punitive damages, which are to punish you for your bad action, right? Mm-hmm. If I just run into you at a stoplight, it's my mistake, and I owe you for your medical bills and your time off of work and your pain and suffering and inconvenience. That's what the law says in almost every state. Mm-hmm. But if I run into you because of something that I did, because I put alcohol in my body, and in Virginia, the standard is more than twice the legal limit. You have to be over a 0.15, which is really drunk. Like if you've ever, by the way, if you've ever done that thing where you drink and you blow in a breathalyzer and you drink and you just see like how it's hard to get to 0.15.
Yeah.
Right.
And walk.
And so if you're over whatever the Virginia twice the legal limit, you are drunk. Right. And so Virginia says if you're over a 1.5 and you cause a crash, then in addition to the damages to compensate the person that you hurt, a jury can also award damages to punish you and to hold you up as an example, really, to other people in the community for like, here's all the other bad things that could happen to you if you drive drunk, and this is even outside the criminal justice system. But that's what makes drunk driving cases different. The crashes, they tend to be more serious, right? Because you have a slowed reaction time, because you're less inhibited, because your vision starts screwing up. So they're worse crashes. They result in worse injuries. And the financial results in verdicts and settlements, they reflect that.
Yeah. Oh, and so tell me about this big case that you had. 'Cause you have one that's kind of crazy with a fight, but I want to hear about let's talk about the big case first.
So in 2022, I took a case to trial, and we started 4 courtrooms down from the Johnny Depp trial.
Oh my gosh.
And what I said to the jury when they walked in is, congratulations. Like, I have good news and I have bad news. Number one, the bad news is the players in this courtroom drama are not going to be nearly as good looking as the players in the Johnny Depp Amber Heard drama, right? That's the bad news. The good news is I'm going to get you out of here in 2 days, and those people are going to be coming to Fairfax County Courthouse every day for the next 2 months. So, like, who wants to stay on my jury? So that's where we started. This was a case where I represent it's these, these cross sections of your life in the universe. So I represented these 2 people that lived about 1.5 miles from each other, and on the night where they'd never met, and on the night where this crash happened, he was coming back from a casino in Maryland. He'd driven 17 miles back to his house. She was coming back from her boyfriend's house. She was coming 3 miles in the other direction. And there's this little stretch of road that overlaps for like a half mile where their paths met. And he crossed the double yellow line, smashed into her head on, killed her dog, caused massive, massive internal injuries in her, broken vertebrae, broken ribs, tore the lining in her intestine, and her colon, required 11 surgeries. She had a colostomy bag for like 9 months, and she was in and out of the hospital for the first 2 months after this crash. Just absolutely wrecked her life. And what I said to the jury in the beginning is, I think this crash happened in 2018, and we were delayed by COVID, and that's why it took us so long to get to trial. So is there anybody here that doesn't have Uber or Lyft on their phone? Because that decision to not spend, I don't know, $50 or $60 to take the Uber home, and his blood alcohol was a 1.6. But it cost $500,000 in medical costs to this woman. It took her out of the workforce for 1.5 years, and it absolutely destroyed her life.
Oh my God. So why was this going to court? Why was the insurance company not settling?
Well, the insurance company, they did try to settle. So, a couple of things happened on the way to the courthouse. Number one, we were not told about all the insurance coverage that existed pre-litigation. And then we worked a deal with her underinsured motorist carrier to collect all of her insurance money that was available to her under her policies. But we never had an offer from his policies, bizarrely. And we weren't even told about all of the insurance money that he had until, a couple of months into the litigation. And then at that point, and she was so mad that she just said, let's just take the case to trial. Right.
Yeah.
Because when we were told how much there was, it was not enough to compensate her for all of her injuries anyway. And really what she wanted to do is to have a greater impact and a legacy. And her goal was to put this guy in a situation where he would be thinking about her for the rest of his life, right? Because his wages were going to be garnished, and they are being garnished now, because you can't declare bankruptcy after a crash that involves alcohol. Again, if you make a mistake and you cause a crash, the U.S. Bankruptcy Code lets you get out of that. But if the Bankruptcy Code says if you cause a crash because you're drunk, then it's okay for somebody to follow you around with that judgment for the rest of your life. So she got into a position with the insurance companies where she was so upset by not being told about everything and by their activities pre-litigation that she just said, screw it, let's just go to trial and see what happens. And, she wanted a jury of Fairfax County citizens to tell her what the case was worth.
And so tell me about, I always like to know about the preparing for trial. How did you prepare for this trial?
So we went out, we hired an expert surgeon to explain all the 11 surgeries that she'd had. We hired a medical graphics company to make illustrations of the surgeries that she'd had and explained what a colostomy bag is, what it does, right? Because you've heard that before, but you probably don't know what it does. We collected a whole bunch of pictures from her life before the crash and after the crash. We conducted a full investigation of everybody who was ever on the scene, from the EMTs to the police officers to the driver himself. And one of the other things that we discovered during the course of this trial is drunk drivers, they're not very good liars. And so his story the whole time was, I had 2 drinks at dinner at the casino, and then I drove home and I thought I was totally fine to drive. Well, a police officer testified he had a bottle of bourbon in the car passenger, in the driver's the little door well, and he didn't know that we knew that until the police officer said it on the stand. And then his defense lawyer, in closing argument, had the gall to get up and suggest that because nobody had secured the crime scene, that bottle of alcohol could have come from anywhere, right? And so all of these little lies and these little aggravations and the failure to take responsibility for action, all of those things lead up and add up and add up and add up to big verdicts. And so this ended up being a $4.24 million verdict. $1 million of that verdict was for punitive damages. As far as we can tell, it's the largest punitive damage result in the state of Virginia. And it was the sixth largest verdict in Virginia and the largest auto accident verdict in Virginia in 2022.
Wow. That's amazing. Well, I mean, congratulations on that. And obviously, it's like you said, it's a legacy thing. Tell me a little bit about, when did you think that this was going to happen? Because it's, you're in the middle of trial and all these things are happening and you've got a jury and that could go anyway. Where was there a moment you're like, I think we've really, really nailed this?
Yeah. Closing argument, right? So after his defense lawyer suggested that maybe the bottle had appeared from nowhere, right? I made some joke about a magical bourbon fairy. It was Fireball. I called it a magical fireball fairy, wandering around crime scenes and dropping bottles of alcohol in people's wheel wells just to get them in trouble. And 3 of the jurors laughed. And I said, okay, this is probably going to go our way. So I asked them for 10 million. So I got less than half of what I asked for. But yeah, I had a pretty good feeling for most of the trial that it was going to go our way. I'll tell you, one of the things that came up during this trial was an issue on science. And I'll try to not go too far down this rabbit hole, but there was an issue about whether the blood that they tested was whole blood or whether it was blood serum, because hospitals do blood draws on whole blood and your test for a DUI conviction on a blood draw is done on blood serum, or maybe I have that backwards, but they'd hired a toxicologist to explain, why it must have been one and wasn't the other. And he said something like, well, it must have been on whole blood because serum takes, 2 hours to spin out, and that test takes a little bit longer. And again, this goes back to like knowing what's in the record. So I thanked him for his testimony, and then we put the medical record into evidence. And the timestamps, of course, are on the medical record of when the blood was drawn, when the tests were done. And the blood was drawn at a certain time, and the test was done like 7 minutes later. And he had said it couldn't have been, I'm going to get this wrong, it couldn't have been the one, it couldn't have been the criminal blood, because they did all this other, because criminal blood is only for like alcohol testing. It's not for what are all the other things that are in the blood. It's not for CBC count. It's not for blood glucose, blah, 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 blah. But the whole blood panel was in evidence. And so, lawyers are really good at asking questions. Most lawyers are not good at stopping before asking one too many questions. And this is an example. Like, all right, I got him to say what I wanted him to say. Now we're just going to leave it, and I'm going to show the jury the paper in closing argument. So that's exactly what we did.
Gotcha. Interesting. And tell me about like how long did the jury deliberate?
Oh, I've forgotten.
Was it days, hours?
No, it wasn't days. It was hours. I don't think we came back the next day. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I've forgotten about that.
And I always like to know the feeling. Like, what were you thinking when they came in and once they read the verdict? What was that like?
So yeah, the 2 most stressful times as a trial lawyer are from when the judge first lets the jury in until the first time that you're allowed to talk during voir dire. And then the period of time from when the bailiff comes out and tells you we have a verdict until the judge or the court clerk reads what the verdict actually is. And those are the most stressful, 30-minute increments in any trial lawyer's life. So yeah, your heart's going. Your client is sitting there with her head down, because she's nervous too, because she's invested 3 years of her life into wanting justice for this. Yeah, those are stressful times.
And what was it like when you heard it?
I wanted more. We were very grateful to have that verdict. I didn't know at the time that it was the largest in the state for the year, obviously. Um, but I wondered what I did wrong to not get the 10 that I asked for.
Gotcha. What do you think you could have done different to get that?
I don't know. I don't know. So in Virginia, large verdicts are not common.
Hmm.
California, Texas, they get big verdicts regularly. Virginia jurors are fairly conservative. I think if I were trying the case again, I really don't know what I would have done differently. This is one of these cases where like everything kind of went your
Right.
way,
Yeah.
and even the motions that you lost really bulletproof the case against an appeal. So I don't know what I would have done differently. I thought the result was great, but at the time I was like, shit. I wonder what I wonder why they discounted what I wanted by 40%,
Yeah.
60%.
No, it's interesting. Yeah, it's crazy. And I'm assuming your client was happy though.
She was over the moon happy. Yes.
Yeah, I mean but it doesn't restore her, bring her dog back, right? It doesn't restore her, make
Mm.
her whole. It does it.
So money never brings people's anything back, right? It's
Yeah.
not going to bring your health back. It's not going to restore the years of life that you've lost. But I think that she, more than anything else, felt that she was heard by a jury, because one of the things that happens, when you have this kind of traumatic injury is you wind up intubated, right? And
Hmm.
you literally lose your voice for the period of time where you're laying in the hospital and you can't speak. So she had a notepad where she had scribbled notes during the period of time between after she woke up and when they extubated her. And I think that she really wanted to felt like she was heard and feel like what she had gone through mattered, because for many, many years, she felt that she was lied to. She felt like the criminal justice system didn't get her the justice that she wanted. And she thought this was the only way to get it. And I think it was.
Well, I mean, congratulations on that. It's a lot of hard work, and I mean, still, you didn't get what you wanted, but that's still an amazing. I know I've worked with other attorneys in Virginia, and it's just tough. It's like one of the
Mm.
toughest states out there to get these types of verdicts. But you also have kind of, you were mentioning it before. I didn't get deep into it, but you had a DUI accident that became a brawl.
Yeah, but my clients weren't involved. Which it's alcohol makes people do wild things. So I had these clients that were rear-ended on a highway, and let me remember this story. Rear-ended on a highway, got out of the car, checked on the people who were in the car. Number one, the passenger tried to fight my client for checking on him. And then number two, while they were waiting to be processed by the police officers who'd shown up on the scene, the passenger actually slapped the driver of his own car, knocked her off. She was sitting on some kind of stone wall, knocked her backwards off the stone wall. So she was arrested for DUI. He was arrested for assault.
Oh my gosh.
Alcohol makes people do weird things.
And so what happened in that case?
That case settled. Yeah, that case settled because there was an appropriate insurance response in the beginning of that one. But we followed. I think this happened like on federal property, and so the DUI and the assault charge actually were handled in the federal criminal system. Which, like, if you're ever going to get a DUI, that's not where you want to have it happen. And so that was interesting because that's all. It's all kind of live broadcast, and so at the time you could have just called in or watched on YouTube the hearing, because this is one of these courthouses where everything was live broadcast to the world. So that was an interesting twist.
Oh man, that's some crazy stuff. And so, tell me a little bit about your firm, about working with you all, and also, I know you all. If you're an attorney, they also work with a lot of other attorneys. They have an amazing group. Tell us a little bit about
Mm.
that as well. But tell us about the firm and
Yeah.
how to work with you first.
Yeah. So the firm is in Northern Virginia. We handle auto cases all throughout the state. but primarily focused in the courthouses in Northern Virginia. Like there's plenty of crashes to go around in this area.
Oh yeah.
And so our focus, Ian, is on coupling excellent legal product with first-class customer service. Because what happens at most law firms is you call and they're still barking law offices into the phone, right? Or even worse, you're going to a phone tree. I talked to a woman who's a marketing director at a major advertiser in Virginia, and the first thing that happens when you dial their 888 repeater number is that you go to a phone tree that asks, "Are you a new client or an existing client?" Like, it's a weird customer service experience.
Yeah.
And so that's what we focus on. So we want to make your life easier by working with us and not harder. And the people in Northern Virginia are hardworking, very, very busy. We were talking before we got on about all of our kids' stuff. And so our goal is to really simplify your life. Like the only thing that you should have to do after you hire us is go to medical care and tell us where you got that medical care. And even if you forget to do that, my team's going to follow up with you once every 30 days to figure out what's going on. So that's our process, is we try to differentiate on best customer service. We get great legal results, but there are many, many firms that get great legal results on, I don't feel like I'm speaking out of class saying that, but there are not many that have the customer service, client service focus that we do. And then the other business that my dad and I run is called Great Legal Marketing. We teach solo and small law firm owners how to run better law firms, run your law firm actually as a business, because it turns out that you can be a really good lawyer, but be really bad at operating a business. You're not attracting the right staff, not marketing very well, not managing your staff. And all of that spills over into not being able to manage your time, not being able to spend time with your family, not being able to go on vacations without checking your emails, or go to dinners without having to talk to clients on the phone. So that's all of what we teach, is how to run your law firm as a better business.
That's great. Yeah. And when it's a better business, you can serve people better.
Exactly. Yeah. And so, right. So when you're a better business, you attract better employees who take better care of your clients and do it at scale, right?
Yep.
I can't talk to everybody who wants to work with us, but I can have a team that talks to everybody that wants to work with us. And then that frees me up to really focus on the highest dollar value levers to pull in every single case.
Yeah, exactly. It's super smart. And also, I mean, it allows allows them to be taken care of properly, because you don't need to be on everything. And I think that is fantastic. So we'll put a link to BenGlassLaw.com. If you've been injured, I'll tell you this. I just want to say this. I've known so many people that have been injured, and genuinely injured, but they're like, I'm not the type of person that sues. Folks, that's what the insurance is there for. Is to take care of you. It's not, and to call an attorney is not a bad thing. That's why we do this. So Ben, thank you. Or Brian, I'm looking at your website. Brian, thank you so much for being on. I'm sure that never happens. Brian, thank you so much for being on True Law Stories. We're going to put a link to BenGlassLaw, Great Legal Marketing, down below. And Brian, where's the best place to follow you online?
Yeah, so I have the Brian Glass on Instagram, TikTok. Probably most active on LinkedIn, which is weird to say, but I'm a lawyer, so that's where you can find me mostly.
So we'll put a link to all that in the show notes. Make sure to reach out. Obviously, if you've been injured or you want to connect with Brian, and we'll put a link to all that. Thank you all for taking Brian and I on your journey. This has been Ian Garlic and True Law Stories.